9-year-old girl was thrown out by her stepmother after her father's death. But what happened next made the stepmother regret. Hello everyone, welcome to our story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. You're nothing but a burden. Rebecca screamed at the top of her voice, pointing her finger at 9-year-old Susan Williams. I never wanted you in the first place, and now that your father is dead, I don't have to pretend to care about you anymore. Susan stood by the front door, tears streaming down her face like a river. In her small hands she clutched a worn-out plastic bag containing her few belongings, 2 old dresses, some underwear, and the teddy bear her daddy had given her for her 6th birthday. Please, Mama Rebecca, Susan begged, her voice shaking with fear. Daddy always said this was my home too. Where will I sleep tonight? It's getting dark outside. Rebecca's face twisted with anger and disgust. The woman who used to smile at Susan when Daddy was alive now looked at her like she was something dirty. I don't care if you sleep in the streets. You are not my responsibility. Your daddy is gone, and with him, any reason for me to keep you around. Uncle Michael stood in the doorway with his arms crossed, nodding his head in agreement. He was Daddy's younger brother, but he didn't look anything like Daddy. Daddy was kind and gentle. Uncle Michael had mean eyes and a cruel smile. Rebecca is right, Susan, Uncle Michael said. You're old enough to take care of yourself. Stop acting like a baby. But I'm only 9 years old, Susan whispered, hugging her teddy bear tighter. The soft brown bear was getting wet from her tears. I don't know how to take care of myself. Then you better learn fast, Rebecca snapped. She walked closer to Susan, her high heels clicking on the floor like a scary movie. Because you're not staying here one more night. You eat too much food, you use too much water, and you cost too much money. I have better things to do with my life than babysit you. Susan remembered when Rebecca used to cook her favorite meals. When Rebecca used to brush her hair and tell her bedtime stories. But that was before Daddy got sick. Before Daddy died. Now Rebecca acted like Susan was her worst enemy. But what about Daddy's money? Susan asked quietly. He said he saved money for me to go to school and buy food. Uncle Michael's face got dark and angry. What money? Your daddy left us nothing but bills to pay. Nothing but problems. Susan knew this wasn't true. She had seen Daddy's bank papers in his desk. She had heard him talking to Uncle Michael about the money just before he died. But every time she asked about it, they got angry. Michael walked over to Susan and grabbed her arm roughly. His big hand hurt her thin arm. Come on, little girl. Time to go. No, please. Susan cried, trying to pull away. This is my daddy's house. He said I could live here forever. Well, your daddy is dead now. Rebecca shouted cruelly. Her voice was so loud it made Susan's ears hurt. And I'm the one who makes the rules. Get out. With that, Michael pushed Susan out of the house. She stumbled and almost fell on the front steps. The heavy wooden door slammed behind her with a loud bang. Susan heard the lock click and she knew they had locked her out of the only home she had ever known. The sky was dark and full of heavy clouds that looked like big gray monsters. Rain began to fall, first in small drops that felt cold on Susan's skin, then getting heavier and heavier. Soon the drops were hitting her head and shoulders like tiny hammers. Susan ran to the gate of the house and pressed her face against the cold metal bars. The metal was so cold it made her cheeks sting. She wrapped her small fingers around the bars and shook them, but the gate was locked tight. Please let me back in, she called out, her voice getting lost in the wind. I promise I'll be good. I promise I won't eat much food. I won't ask for anything. Please don't leave me out here. But no one answered. The lights in the house were on, warm and yellow like sunshine. Through the windows, Susan could see Rebecca and Michael sitting comfortably on the sofa, watching television and eating dinner like nothing had happened. Like she had never existed. The rain got stronger and stronger, soaking through Susan's thin dress and making her shiver with cold. Her teeth started chattering. Her hair stuck to her head like wet string. She had nowhere to go. No other family to call. No friends whose houses she knew. At 9 years old, she was completely alone in the world. Susan sat down on the wet ground by the gate. The cold water from the ground soaked through her dress, making her even colder. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them, trying to make herself as small as possible. Then she cried into her teddy bear. Daddy, she whispered to the teddy bear, why did you leave me? You promised you would always take care of me. You promised I would always have a home. The rain mixed with her tears, and she had never felt so scared and helpless in her entire life. Cars drove by on the street, their headlights making bright lines in the darkness. But none of them stopped. None of the people inside could see the little girl crying by the gate. Susan thought about all the times Daddy had tucked her into bed. All the times he had made her favorite pancakes for breakfast. All the times he had told her she was the most important person in his whole world. "I miss you so much, Daddy," she cried. "I don't know what to do without you." Thunder rumbled overhead like an angry giant. The rain came down even harder. Susan was so cold now that she couldn't stop shaking. Her lips were turning blue and her fingers felt like ice. Just then a black car pulled up to the house. The headlights cut through the darkness and rain like two bright swords. Susan looked up, hoping maybe it was someone who could help her, but she was too scared to move. What if it was someone mean like Rebecca and Uncle Michael? The car door opened and a tall man in a nice suit stepped out, holding a big black umbrella. He had kind eyes and a gentle face. He looked at the house, then looked down and saw Susan sitting by the gate, soaking wet and crying. "Oh my goodness," the man said, rushing over to her. His voice was soft and worried. "Little girl, what are you doing out here in this rain?" Susan looked up at him with her big, frightened eyes. She recognized him from Daddy's funeral 3 days ago. He was one of the men who had cried when they talked about Daddy. One of the men who had said nice things about how good Daddy was. "Sir," Susan said in a tiny voice, "I don't have anywhere to go." The man's face filled with shock and sadness. He held his umbrella over Susan to protect her from the rain. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Where are your parents?" "My daddy died," Susan whispered. "And Mama Rebecca said I'm a burden. She locked me out of the house." The man's eyes got very angry, but Susan could tell he wasn't angry at her. He was angry at Rebecca and Uncle Michael. "Your name is Susan, isn't it?" the man asked gently. "Susan Williams?" Susan nodded, surprised that he knew her name. "My name is Daniel Thompson," the man said. "I was your daddy's friend. A very good friend." Susan remembered now. This was the man Daddy used to talk about. The man Daddy said was like a brother to him. The man Daddy had helped when they were young. "Mr. Daniel," Susan said, her voice still shaking, "Mama Rebecca says I can't live in Daddy's house anymore. But I don't know where else to go." Daniel's face got even more angry. He looked at the house where warm light glowed in the windows. He could see Rebecca and Michael inside, acting like nothing was wrong. "Susan," Daniel said firmly, "you are not staying out here in this rain for one more minute. Come with me." Daniel knelt down so he was at Susan's eye level. Even though the rain was still falling hard, he kept the big umbrella over her to keep her dry. "Susan," he said in a voice that was both gentle and strong, "I want you to listen to me carefully. Your daddy was the most important person in my life when I was young. He helped me when no one else would. He was like a big brother to me." Susan wiped her nose with the back of her wet hand. "Really? Really?" Daniel said with a sad smile. "When I was in school, my family had no money to pay for my classes. I was going to have to quit and never become the man I am today. But your daddy used his own money to help me finish school. He said every child deserves a chance to learn and grow up safely." Susan's eyes got a little brighter. "Daddy always said education was the most important thing in the world." "He was right," Daniel said. "And now I'm going to help you just like he helped me. You are not staying out here in the cold and rain. You're coming home with me." "But what about Mama Rebecca?" Susan asked, looking scared. "What if she gets angry?" Daniel's face got very serious. "Susan, what Rebecca did to you tonight was wrong. Very wrong. Adults are supposed to take care of children, not throw them out into the rain. I'm going to have a talk with her and your Uncle Michael." Daniel stood up and walked to the front door of the house. He knocked 3 times very loud. Bang, bang, bang. After a few moments, Rebecca opened the door. She was still wearing her nice dress and her hair was perfectly done. She looked surprised and annoyed to see Daniel standing there. "Daniel Thompson," she said in a fake sweet voice. "What are you doing here so late? And in this terrible rain?" "I'm here about Susan," Daniel said in a voice that was calm but scary at the same time. "The little girl you threw out into the storm." Rebecca's face changed. She tried to smile, but it looked mean and fake. "All that. Susan is just being dramatic. Children need to learn that life isn't always easy." "She's 9 years old, Rebecca," Daniel said, his voice getting stronger. "She's sitting outside in the rain with nowhere to go. How is that teaching her anything except that the adults who should protect her don't care about her?" Uncle Michael appeared behind Rebecca. He had food in his mouth and was still chewing. "Daniel, this is none of your business. Susan is family. We know what's best for her." "Do you?" Daniel asked. "Because what's best for a 9-year-old child is not sleeping on the street in a thunderstorm." Rebecca crossed her arms and lifted her chin up high. She needs to learn to be independent. Her daddy spoiled her too much. Now it's time for her to grow up. By throwing her out of her own father's house? Daniel's voice was getting louder now. This is John's house. This is where Susan belongs. This is my house now, Rebecca said coldly. John is gone and I make the decisions. Susan costs too much money. She eats too much food. She's not my real daughter anyway. Daniel looked at Rebecca and Michael like they were the meanest people he had ever seen. John would be heartbroken if he could see how you're treating his little girl. Well, John isn't here anymore, Michael said with a nasty smile. And we don't have to pretend to love his daughter anymore. Daniel stared at them for a long moment. Rain was dripping from his umbrella onto the ground. Finally, he said in a voice that was quiet but very, very strong. Fine. Susan is coming with me. Tonight. You can't just take someone else's child. Rebecca said, but she didn't sound worried. She sounded like she was happy about it. I'm not taking her, Daniel said. I'm rescuing her. There's a big difference. Daniel turned around and walked back to Susan. She was still sitting by the gate, shivering and holding her teddy bear. Susan, he said gently, I want you to come with me. I have a warm house with hot food and a comfortable bed. You'll be safe there. Susan looked up at him with big, hopeful eyes. Really? You won't throw me out too? Daniel's heart felt like it was breaking. Sweetheart, I promise you. I will never ever throw you out. Your daddy saved my life once and now I'm going to take care of you. He reached out his hand to Susan. Will you come with me? Susan looked back at the house one more time. Through the window she could see Rebecca and Michael going back to their dinner and their television show. They didn't even look worried about her. Then she looked up at Daniel's kind face. She remembered how Daddy used to talk about him. How Daddy said Daniel was one of the good people in the world. Susan put her small, cold hand in Daniel's big, warm hand. Okay, Mr. Daniel, she whispered. I'll come with you. Daniel helped Susan stand up. Her legs were shaky from sitting in the cold rain for so long. He wrapped his big coat around her small shoulders. The coat was so big on her that it almost touched the ground, but it was warm and dry. Let's get you out of this rain, Daniel said softly. He picked up Susan's plastic bag with her few belongings. The bag was soaking wet, but he carried it carefully like it contained the most important things in the world. As they walked to his car, Susan looked back one more time at the house where she had lived her whole life. The windows were still glowing with warm yellow light. She could still see Rebecca and Michael inside, eating and watching TV like nothing had happened. Will I ever see my home again? Susan asked quietly. Daniel opened the car door for her. Susan, a home isn't just a building. A home is a place where people love you and take care of you. That house stopped being your home the moment they decided to hurt you. Susan climbed into the car. The seats were soft and warm. Daniel turned on the heater, and warm air started blowing on Susan's cold face and hands. But what about all Daddy's things? Susan asked. His pictures and his books and his favorite chair? We'll figure that out, Daniel said as he started the car. Right now, the most important thing is getting you somewhere safe and warm. As they drove through the rainy streets, Susan pressed her face against the window. She watched other houses go by, all lit up with families inside. She wondered if the children in those houses were safe and loved, or if some of them were scared like she had been. Mr. Daniel, Susan said after a few minutes, why did Mama Rebecca change? She used to be nice to me when Daddy was alive. Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to explain something so complicated to a 9-year-old. Sometimes, Susan, people show their true selves only when they think no one important is watching. When your daddy was alive, Rebecca had to be nice to you because she knew it would make him happy. But now that he's gone, she doesn't have to pretend anymore, Susan finished sadly. I'm afraid that's right, sweetheart. They pulled into the driveway of a big, beautiful house. It had a nice garden and bright lights by the front door. Susan had never seen a house so pretty. This is where you live? She asked, her eyes wide with wonder. This is where we live now, Daniel said with a smile. At least until we figure out what's best for you. Daniel helped Susan out of the car and they ran through the rain to the front door. Inside, the house was warm and cozy. There were soft carpets on the floor and comfortable furniture everywhere. It smelled like vanilla candles and fresh flowers. Are you hungry, Susan? Daniel asked, taking off his wet coat. Susan's stomach made a loud rumbling sound. She put her hand over it, embarrassed. I haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Mama Rebecca said there wasn't enough food for me. Daniel's face got angry again, but he tried not to show it. Well, we're going to fix that right now. How about some hot soup and grilled cheese sandwiches? Susan's eyes lit up. Really? That's my favorite. I thought it might be, Daniel said with a wink. Your daddy told me you loved grilled cheese. While Daniel cooked, Susan sat at the kitchen table, still wearing his big coat. She watched him move around the kitchen, making food just for her. No one had cooked for her in 3 days. Mr. Daniel, Susan said quietly, why are you being so nice to me? You don't even know me very well. Daniel stopped stirring the soup and looked at her. Susan, when I was not much older than you, I was in a very difficult situation. I thought my dreams were over. I thought I would never amount to anything. But your daddy believed in me when no one else did. He poured the hot soup into a bowl and brought it to Susan. Steam rose from the bowl, smelling like chicken and vegetables. Your daddy didn't just give me money for school, Daniel continued. He gave me hope. He showed me that there are good people in the world who help others just because it's the right thing to do. Susan took a sip of the soup. It was the most delicious thing she had tasted in days. And now you're helping me like Daddy helped you? Exactly, Daniel said, sitting down across from her. Your daddy taught me that when someone helps you, you don't just pay them back. You pass that kindness on to someone else who needs it. Susan ate her soup slowly, savoring every spoonful. For the first time in 3 days she felt warm and safe. Mr. Daniel, she said between bites, do you think Daddy would be happy that you're taking care of me? Daniel smiled and his eyes looked a little watery. Susan, I think your daddy is looking down at us right now and he's very, very proud. After Susan finished eating, Daniel showed her to a guest bedroom. It had a big, soft bed with clean white sheets and fluffy pillows. There were books on the nightstand and a lamp that gave off gentle, warm light. This room is yours for as long as you need it, Daniel said. The bathroom is right across the hall. There are clean towels and soap, and tomorrow we'll go shopping for some new clothes for you. Susan looked around the beautiful room. It was bigger than the tiny room she'd had at Rebecca's house, and it felt safe and peaceful. Mr. Daniel, she said, hugging her teddy bear tight, what's going to happen to me now? Will I be able to go to school? Will I have to go back to Mama Rebecca? Daniel knelt down and put his gentle hands on Susan's shoulders. Susan, I promise you this. You will never have to go back to people who don't treat you with love and kindness. As for school, yes, you will definitely go to school. Education was important to your daddy, and it's important to me too. But what about Mama Rebecca and Uncle Michael? What if they want me back? Daniel's face got serious. Susan, I need to tell you something and I want you to listen carefully. Tomorrow I'm going to call some people who can help us. There are laws that protect children from being hurt or thrown out of their homes. What Rebecca and Michael did to you was against the law. Susan's eyes got wide. Against the law? Yes, sweetheart. Adults have a responsibility to take care of children, especially family members. They can't just throw you out because they don't want to spend money on you. Daniel tucked Susan into the warm bed. The sheets smelled like lavender and felt softer than clouds. But for tonight, Daniel said softly, I want you to rest and not worry about anything. You're safe now. No one is going to hurt you or throw you out into the rain. I promise. Susan looked up at him with tired but hopeful eyes. Mr. Daniel, will you tell me about my daddy when he was young? About how you two were friends? Daniel smiled and sat on the edge of the bed. I would love to tell you about your daddy. Did you know that when we were young, he was the bravest person I ever met? As Daniel began to tell stories about her father, Susan felt herself getting sleepy. For the first time since Daddy died, she felt like maybe everything was going to be okay. But she didn't know that while she was falling asleep safe and warm, Daniel was making phone calls that would change everything. The next morning, Susan woke up to the smell of pancakes and bacon. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she remembered she was safe in Mr. Daniel's house, not cold and wet outside Rebecca's gate. She walked to the kitchen and found Daniel making breakfast. He was wearing a casual shirt and jeans, and he looked much friendlier than he had in his suit the night before. Good morning, sunshine, Daniel said with a warm smile. How did you sleep? Better than I have in a long time, Susan said honestly. The bed was so soft and warm. I'm glad, Daniel said, putting a plate of pancakes in front of her. Susan, after breakfast, I need to make some important phone calls about your situation. There are people who can help us make sure you're properly taken care of. Susan poured syrup on her pancakes. What kind of people? Well, first I'm going to call your daddy's lawyer. His name is Mr. Anderson and he was your daddy's good friend too. After breakfast, Daniel sat in his home office while Susan played quietly in the living room with some books he had given her. She could hear him talking on the phone, but his voice was serious and low. Anderson, Daniel said into the phone. It's Daniel Thompson. I need to talk to you about John Williams' daughter, Susan. Daniel, came the voice through the phone. Anderson sounded surprised. I was wondering what happened to that poor child. How is she? She's safe now, but Anderson, what I'm going to tell you will make you very angry. Daniel told Anderson everything that had happened the night before. There was a long silence on the phone. Finally, Anderson spoke, and his voice was full of anger and sadness. Those monsters, Anderson said. Daniel, I have to tell you something. I've been hearing whispers around town. Strange things about Michael and the way he's been handling John's affairs. What kind of whispers? Daniel asked, leaning forward in his chair. Well, first of all, Michael has been trying to change ownership papers for John's farmland. The land that's supposed to belong to Susan when she grows up. I heard from someone at the land office that Michael offered money to have new papers made with his name on them instead. Daniel's face got very serious. That's illegal, isn't it? Very illegal, Anderson said. Forgery and bribery. But Daniel, there's something else. Something even worse. Tell me. Anderson's voice got quieter. I've been thinking a lot about John's car accident. The one that took his life 3 weeks ago. Something about it never felt right to me. What do you mean? John was the most careful driver I knew. He always checked his car before long trips. He always wore his seatbelt. He never drove fast. But the police said his brakes failed completely on that hill outside town. Daniel felt a cold feeling in his stomach. You think someone might have? I don't know, Anderson said. But I think we should ask some questions. That afternoon, Daniel drove to Tony's auto repair shop on the other side of town. Tony was the mechanic who had fixed Daniel's car many times over the years. He was an honest man who knew everything about cars. Hey Daniel, Tony said when he saw him. What brings you here? Your car running okay? Actually, Tony, I wanted to ask you about something else. Do you remember John Williams? He died in that car crash 3 weeks ago? Tony's face got sad and worried. Oh yeah, poor John. That was a terrible thing. He was such a good man. Tony, Daniel said carefully, did anyone ever ask you questions about how to make car brakes fail? Tony looked around the garage to make sure no one else was listening. Then he stepped closer to Daniel and lowered his voice. Funny you should ask that, Tony said. About a month before John died, his brother Michael came to see me. Asked me all sorts of strange questions about brake systems. How they work, what could make them stop working, stuff like that. Daniel felt that cold feeling in his stomach getting stronger. Did he say why he wanted to know? He said he was thinking about buying a used car and wanted to know what to look out for. But Daniel? Tony looked around again. The questions he asked weren't the kind you'd ask if you were buying a car. They were the kind you'd ask if you wanted to make a car crash. Are you sure about this, Tony? Tony nodded his head slowly. I've been thinking about it ever since John died. I keep wondering if I should have told someone. But who would believe me? Michael is John's brother. Why would he want to hurt his own brother? Maybe, Daniel said quietly, because John had something Michael wanted. Daniel drove home with his heart pounding. When he got there, he immediately called Anderson again. Anderson, I need to see you right now. And I think we need to search John's office. The one at his house. Daniel, what did you find out? I think Michael is the reason his own brother is gone. 2 hours later, Daniel and Anderson stood outside John's house. It was the same house where Rebecca had thrown Susan out into the rain the night before. But now the house was empty. Rebecca and Michael had gone shopping in town. Anderson had a key to the house because he was John's lawyer and had helped John with his business papers for many years. John's office is upstairs, Anderson said as they walked through the front door. The house felt cold and empty without John's warm presence. Susan's toys were still scattered in the living room, but everything else looked like Rebecca had already started throwing away John's things. John's office was a small room with a big wooden desk and lots of books on the walls. There were family pictures everywhere, pictures of John and Susan at the park, at the beach, on her first day of school. John loved that little girl more than anything in the world, Anderson said sadly, looking at the pictures. Which is why we're going to make sure she gets justice, Daniel said. Now, where would John hide something important? They searched through the desk drawers, the bookshelf, and the filing cabinet. Most of the important papers were gone, probably taken by Michael and Rebecca. Wait, Anderson said. John once told me he had a secret drawer in this desk. A place where he kept his most important things. Anderson felt around under the desk until he heard a small click. A hidden drawer slid open. Inside the drawer were 2 things. A sealed white envelope with Susan's name written on it in John's handwriting, and a small flash drive. This is it, Daniel said. This is what John wanted us to find. Anderson opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter written in John's careful handwriting. Daniel read the letter out loud. If you are reading this, it means something has happened to me, and I am no longer here to protect my daughter Susan. I'm writing this because I am scared. My brother Michael has been acting very strange lately. He keeps asking me to sign papers that would give him control of my business and my land. When I refuse, he gets very angry. Rebecca has also changed. She used to love Susan like her own daughter, but now she only pretends when I'm watching. I've heard her talking to Michael about how much money it costs to raise Susan. They think Susan is in their way. I don't want to believe that my own brother would hurt me, but I am scared enough to write this letter. If something happens to me, please make sure Susan is safe. Make sure she gets the inheritance I have saved for her. And please investigate my death carefully. It might not be an accident. Daniel and Anderson looked at each other with shock and sadness. John knew, Anderson whispered. He knew they were planning something. Daniel picked up the flash drive. Let's see what's on here. They went to John's computer and put in the flash drive. A video file appeared on the screen. When they clicked on it, John's face appeared. He looked tired and worried, not like the happy John they remembered. If you're watching this video, John said, it means my fears have come true. Michael has been pressuring me for months to sign over my company shares to him. He says it's for family unity, but I know he just wants my money. Video John looked directly into the camera. Rebecca is part of this too. She's been telling Michael how much money we could save if we didn't have to take care of Susan anymore. They think I don't hear them talking, but I do. The video John's voice got shaky. I love my brother, but I think he might try to hurt me. If something happens to me, please protect my little girl. She's all that matters to me. Daniel and Anderson sat in silence after the video ended. Finally, Anderson spoke. We have to take this to the police. Yes, Daniel said. But first, let's make copies of everything. We can't let Rebecca and Michael destroy this evidence. Just as they were finishing copying the files, they heard a car pulling into the driveway. They're back, Daniel said. We need to get out of here. But as they tried to leave through the back door, they heard Rebecca's voice from the front of the house. I know someone was in here. Michael, check the office. Daniel and Anderson froze. They could hear footsteps coming up the stairs, heavy footsteps that sounded like Uncle Michael's boots. Quick, Anderson whispered. The back window. They quietly opened the window in John's office and climbed out onto the roof. The roof was still wet from last night's rain, and they had to be very careful not to slip. They could hear Michael's angry voice getting closer. Someone was definitely in here. Michael shouted from inside the office. The computer is still warm. Daniel and Anderson climbed down from the roof and ran to Daniel's car, which was parked around the corner where Rebecca and Michael couldn't see it. They drove away quickly, their hearts beating fast. That was too close, Anderson said, breathing hard. But we got what we needed. Now we take it to the police, Daniel said firmly. The next morning, Daniel and Anderson sat in the police station across from Detective Williams, a kind woman with short gray hair who had been solving crimes for 20 years. This is very serious, Detective Williams said after looking at John's letter and watching his video. If what you're telling me is true, we're not just talking about child abuse. We might be talking about murder. What do we do now? Daniel asked. We investigate, the detective said. But we have to be very careful. We can't let Michael and Rebecca know we're watching them, or they might try to destroy more evidence. Over the next week, Detective Williams and her team worked quietly. They talked to Tony the mechanic, who told them about Michael's strange questions about car brakes. They talked to people at the land office, who confirmed that Michael had tried to bribe them to change John's property papers. They also talked to neighbors who had seen how Rebecca treated Susan after John died. Mrs. Johnson from next door told them she had heard Susan crying many nights, and had seen Rebecca refusing to give the child food. That poor little girl, Mrs. Johnson said, shaking her head sadly. I wanted to help, but I didn't know how. I should have called someone sooner. Meanwhile, Susan was staying with Daniel and going to a new school. Every day she seemed a little happier and a little less scared. Daniel had bought her new clothes, new books, and toys. But most importantly, he treated her with the love and kindness that every child deserves. Mr. Daniel, Susan said one evening as they ate dinner together, do you think Daddy knows that you're taking care of me? I think he does, sweetheart, Daniel said. And I think he's very grateful. But Susan still had nightmares sometimes. She would dream about being thrown out in the rain, or about Uncle Michael's mean face, or about Daddy's car crash. When she woke up scared, Daniel would sit with her until she felt safe again. 2 weeks after Susan had been rescued, Detective Williams called Daniel with important news. "Daniel, we've gathered enough evidence. We're going to arrest Rebecca and Michael tomorrow morning. Are you sure you have a strong case?" Daniel asked. "Very sure," the detective said. "The mechanic's testimony, the attempted bribery at the land office, John's video and letter, and the testimony from neighbors about Susan's treatment. Plus, we had a forensic expert look at John's car wreck again. There are signs that someone definitely tampered with the brakes." The next morning was bright and sunny. Daniel had taken Susan to school as usual, but he came back home early because Detective Williams had promised to call him when the arrest happened. At 10 o'clock in the morning, 3 police cars pulled up to John's house. Rebecca and Michael were in the front yard, talking to some neighbors and acting like they were sad about John's death and taking good care of his daughter. Detective Williams and 4 other officers walked up to Rebecca and Michael. All the neighbors stopped talking and watched. "Rebecca Henderson and Michael Williams," Detective Williams said in a loud, clear voice, "you are under arrest for child abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy in connection with the death of John Williams." Rebecca's face went completely white. "What? This is ridiculous. We haven't done anything wrong." "You have the right to remain silent," Detective Williams continued as another officer put handcuffs on Rebecca's wrists. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in court." Michael tried to run, but 2 officers caught him before he could get to his car. "This is insane," he shouted as they put handcuffs on him too. "My brother died in an accident. And we were taking care of his daughter." "By throwing her out in the rain?" Detective Williams asked. "By starving her? By trying to steal her inheritance?" All the neighbors gasped. Mrs. Johnson put her hand over her mouth in shock. "They threw little Susan out in the rain?" she said loudly. "That poor baby." Other neighbors started talking angrily. "I knew something was wrong when we stopped seeing Susan playing in the yard. Rebecca always seemed fake to me. Poor John. He trusted his brother." As the police cars drove away with Rebecca and Michael inside, Rebecca pressed her face against the window and shouted at the neighbors. "This isn't over. Daniel Thompson thinks he's so smart, but we'll see who wins in court. You'll all regret believing his lies." Daniel, who had been watching from his car down the street, felt both happy and worried. Happy that justice was beginning, but worried because he knew Rebecca was right about one thing: this was far from over. That evening, Daniel sat Susan down for a serious talk. "Susan," he said gently, "I need to tell you what happened today. The police arrested Rebecca and Michael." Susan's eyes got wide. "Arrested? Like bad guys in movies?" "Yes, sweetheart. They broke the law when they hurt you and when they tried to steal your daddy's things. But Susan, this means there will be a trial in court. And the lawyers might ask you to tell the judge what happened to you." Susan looked scared. "Will Rebecca and Michael be there?" "Yes, they will. But they'll be sitting far away from you, and there will be lots of people there to protect you. And I'll be right beside you the whole time." Susan was quiet for a long moment, hugging her teddy bear. "Mr. Daniel," she said finally, "if I tell the truth about what they did to me, will it help make sure they can't hurt other children?" Daniel's heart felt proud of this brave little girl. "Yes, Susan. Telling the truth is the most important thing you can do." "Then I'll do it," Susan said with determination. "Daddy always said telling the truth was right, even when it's scary." 3 months later, the day of the trial arrived. The courthouse was a big, important-looking building with tall columns and many steps leading to the front door. Susan wore a pretty blue dress that Daniel had bought for her. She held his hand tightly as they walked up the steps. "Remember, Susan," Daniel said softly, "just tell the truth. That's all you have to do." Inside the courtroom, there were many people sitting in rows of wooden benches. At the front of the room was the judge's tall desk, and below it were tables where the lawyers would sit. Susan saw Rebecca and Michael sitting at one table with their lawyer. They were wearing nice clothes and looked confident, like they thought they were going to win. Rebecca even smiled when she saw Susan, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that said, "I'm going to get you back." Michael whispered something to Rebecca, and they both looked at Daniel with mean eyes. Anderson, John's lawyer who was now helping Susan, sat at the other table. He had brought boxes full of papers and evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the judge said in a deep, serious voice, "we are here today to hear the case against Rebecca Henderson and Michael Williams. They are accused of child abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy." Rebecca and Michael's lawyer stood up first. He was a tall man in an expensive suit who talked in a fancy way. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "my clients are the victims here. They were simply trying to discipline a difficult child and manage a complicated family situation after a tragic loss. Rebecca Henderson stepped up to care for her stepdaughter after her husband's untimely death in a car accident. Michael Williams helped his sister-in-law during this difficult time. These are not the actions of criminals, but of caring family members. Susan felt angry hearing these lies, but Daniel squeezed her hand gently to remind her to stay calm. Then Anderson stood up. He looked serious and determined. "Your Honor," Anderson said, "the evidence will show that these defendants are not caring family members, but greedy manipulators who abused a 9-year-old child and conspired to steal her inheritance. We will prove that they may have even murdered her father to get his money and property." The courtroom got very quiet. This was much more serious than anyone had expected. "Mr. Anderson," the judge said, "please present your evidence." Anderson walked over to a big TV screen at the front of the courtroom. "First, I want to show you a video that John Williams made before his death." He pressed play, and suddenly John's face appeared on the screen. Susan gasped. She hadn't seen her daddy's face since he died. Tears started running down her cheeks. John's voice filled the quiet courtroom. "If you're watching this, it means something has happened to me, and I am no longer here to protect my daughter Susan." As the video played, Susan watched Rebecca and Michael's faces. They no longer looked confident. They looked scared and angry. When the video finished, the whole courtroom was silent. Even the judge looked shocked. Anderson continued presenting his case. He called Tony the mechanic to the witness stand. "Mr. Martinez," Anderson said, "please tell the court about your conversation with Michael Williams before John's death." Tony looked nervous but spoke clearly. "Michael came to my shop about a month before John died. He asked me detailed questions about brake systems, how to make them fail, what would happen if certain parts were removed. When I asked why he wanted to know, he said he was buying a used car, but his questions were too specific. They were the kind of questions someone would ask if they wanted to sabotage a car." The jury members looked at each other with shocked expressions. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Next, Anderson called the forensic expert who had examined the forged land documents. "The signatures on these property transfer papers are definitely fake," the expert explained. "John Williams never signed these documents. Someone traced his signature from other papers, but they made small mistakes that show it was copied." Anderson presented bank records showing that Michael had tried to bribe the land office clerk with $500 to process the fake papers. Finally, Anderson turned to Susan. "Your Honor, I would like to call Susan Williams to the witness stand." Susan's legs felt wobbly as she walked to the front of the courtroom. The judge's chair seemed so high above her, and there were so many people watching. But Daniel had walked with her and was sitting in the front row, giving her encouraging smiles. The court clerk helped Susan stand on a small box so everyone could see her. Her voice was small but clear as she promised to tell the truth. "Susan," Anderson said gently, "can you tell us what happened after your daddy died?" Susan took a deep breath and looked at Daniel for strength. Then she began to speak. "After Daddy died, Mama Rebecca changed. She stopped being nice to me. She said I ate too much food and cost too much money. She made me sleep on the floor sometimes, and she wouldn't let me eat dinner if I made any noise." The jury listened with sad faces as Susan continued. "Then 3 days ago, Mama Rebecca screamed at me that I was a burden. She said she never wanted me. Uncle Michael grabbed my arm and it hurt, and they pushed me outside in the rain. They locked the gate and wouldn't let me back in. I sat outside crying and shivering until Mr. Daniel found me." Some people in the courtroom were crying as Susan told her story. Even the judge looked very sad. "Susan," Anderson asked, "before your daddy died, did you ever hear Rebecca and Michael talking about you?" Susan nodded. "Yes. I heard them say that taking care of me was too expensive. And Uncle Michael said that once Daddy was gone, they wouldn't have to pretend to love me anymore." Rebecca's lawyer tried to ask Susan confusing questions to make her story sound untrue, but Susan answered honestly and simply. Her truth was so clear and real that everyone could see she was telling exactly what had happened. When Susan finished, she walked back to sit with Daniel. He put his arm around her and whispered, "You were so brave, sweetheart. Daddy would be so proud of you." The judge called for a break, and when court started again, she had made her decision. "Rebecca Henderson and Michael Williams," the judge said in a stern voice, "this court finds you both guilty of child abuse, fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The evidence clearly shows that you abused a vulnerable child and attempted to steal her rightful inheritance. While we cannot prove murder beyond reasonable doubt, the suspicious circumstances surrounding John Williams' death will be investigated further by the authorities." Rebecca and Michael's confident smiles were completely gone. Rebecca started crying, but not sad tears, angry tears. "This is not fair," Rebecca shouted. "That child is lying. She's just trying to get attention." "The court sentences you both to 5 years in prison," the judge continued firmly. "Additionally, Mr. Thompson, given your relationship with the deceased and your care for the child, this court grants you full legal custody of Susan Williams." Police officers came forward with handcuffs. As they led Rebecca and Michael away, Rebecca turned and glared at Daniel and Susan. "This isn't over," she screamed. "I'll appeal this. I'll make you both pay." But her threats sounded empty now. The truth had won. Outside the courthouse, Daniel knelt down to Susan's level. "Susan," he said with tears of joy in his eyes, "you're officially my daughter now. If you want to be." Susan threw her arms around Daniel's neck. "Yes, I want to be your daughter. Can I call you Daddy Daniel?" "I would love that," Daniel said, hugging her tight. 6 months later, Daniel kept a promise he had made to Susan. They went back to John's house, but this time it was different. Daniel had bought the house from the bank and completely redecorated it. The dark, sad rooms were now painted in bright, happy colors. There were new toys and books everywhere. The kitchen that had once been cold and unwelcoming was now warm and filled with the smell of fresh cookies. "This was Daddy's house," Susan said, walking through the rooms with wonder. "But it feels different now. It feels happy." "That's because this house is full of love again," Daniel said. "Just like your daddy would have wanted." In the living room, Daniel had hung up all the pictures of Susan and John, but he had also added new pictures of Susan and Daniel at the park, Susan's first day at her new school, Susan learning to ride a bike. "Susan," Daniel said as they stood in the bright, cheerful living room, "I want to tell you something important. This house isn't just yours. I want it to be a place where any child who feels unwanted can come and feel safe." Susan's eyes lit up with understanding. "Like how you made me feel safe when I was scared and alone?" "Exactly," Daniel said. "Your daddy taught me that when someone helps you, you pass that kindness on to others. This house will be our way of passing on your daddy's kindness." Susan ran through the house, her footsteps echoing in the halls that had once been silent and sad. Now they were filled with the sound of laughter and joy. She stopped in the kitchen where Rebecca used to refuse to feed her, and she smiled. She ran through the living room where Uncle Michael used to sit and be mean to her, and she laughed. Daniel stood in the doorway, watching Susan rediscover her childhood home. But this wasn't just the same house where bad things had happened. This was a new home filled with love, safety, and hope. "Daddy," Susan whispered to her teddy bear as she spun around in the sunny living room, "I'm home. Really home." And for the first time since her father died, Susan Williams felt like the luckiest little girl in the world. Daniel smiled as he watched her play. John's memory lived on, not in sadness, but in the joy of a child who was finally safe and loved again. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video.